Welcome. My name is Alex, and I'm here to talk to you about how you can level up your AI-assisted coding. I like to say that I used to be a developer, but nowadays AI writes all my code. I haven't written a single line of code since probably November. It was not love at first sight, but I have a background in machine learning and pattern recognition, but I had a sort of 10-year hiatus from writing code, and I think that was a benefit, because when I came back, I was not sort of set in my ways of working. So a lot of my friends are developers. I think they were also the most reluctant people that I know when it comes to AI coding. And I think the problem is we, as tech-savvy people, were probably the early adopters. And if we started and tested this 2 years ago, let's be honest, it was mediocre at best. But a lot has happened since then. So I'm going to ask a quick show of hands. How many of you use AI in your work to help you write code? All right, great. How many of you let AI write all of your code? Yeah, more hands than I saw last time I did a similar talk a couple of months ago. So it's sort of increasing. But to me, I think something happened around November when we got Opus 4.5. I think that was sort of a point in time where things shifted, and we went from sort of having to chaperone everything and sort of have a hand on everything, and then actually it started working and actually was able to write proper code. I'm not saying it's perfect, but I like to say also that the models we use today are the worst models we're going to use for the rest of our lives. It's only getting better. And I think it helps, like the adoption. Of course, a lot of people have started using AI to help them now, and I think it helps when sort of big famous people start talking positively about this as well. So some of these people you might know. Boris is the creator of Claude Code. Karpathy, obviously the one that coined the term vibe coding last year. I think he regrets that. But we also saw Linus post around Christmas time that he obviously have been quite negative against AI coding. Actually admitted that now it's come to the level where he can actually use it as well. So I think we're moving in the direction where we're starting to see real value coming out of this. I heard Google last week said that they've come to the point where they now have more than 70% of their code written by AI. And back in December, it was around 50. So it's moving at a fairly high pace. This talk, I'm going to try to give you a collection of tips that I've acquired over the years. I started about 2.5 years ago working with AI, and at that time it was obviously tab completions. But I sort of never gave up, so I kept pushing it. I had to keep a hand on the steering wheel. And I think it's possible to learn to trust more and more and actually get into the place where this becomes what I would call a compounding effect. Not just us having to repeat the same things over and over to AI. My dream is that the AI learns from how we work together and that it improves. And maybe one day I wake up in the morning and it's already taken care of everything for me, so I can drink my coffee. But the point is, the tips that I'm going to show you are applicable to most tools. So take your choice. How many of you use Claude Code? Good. I would say that right now Claude Code is, in my opinion, the best coding agent harness that we have. But you can apply most of these tips to most of these tools. But there are certain features at the end of my talk which are currently only available in Claude Code. So tip number 0, before we kick things off, I think is maybe one of the most important things when you approach this, and obviously a lot of you have already started. And I think that is all about mindset. It's not just about technology. It's not about Claude Code or whatever coding harness we use. but actually having a mindset there. And I think it's an active choice we have when we work together with AI. Rather than just saying it'll do everything for me, I think we have a choice. We can choose to be lazy and sort of just send it off and accept whatever comes out, which I would not recommend. And then we have a choice of using this in a collaborative way, actually using the value and the know-how and our experience to strengthen the output, to improve the output that comes from the AI. And I think you can do this also for the younger generation of coders that may be a bit scared now that they might not get a job because we don't need juniors anymore. I don't agree with that. I think we should have more faith in juniors. And I think we need to change the mindset that we have that when we grew up learning to code, we did that on the job, and that was how we became the coders we are today. And I think the next generation will have a whole new tool suite that we didn't have access to. But of course, we're in sort of in a limbo situation right now. But to all of you that are starting out, choose the collaborative approach. Choose to be a pair programmer with your AI, and invite AI to the table. If you manage to use that mindset, I think you'll see a dramatic increase in quality. How many of you have heard about compound engineering? None. OK. Good. Then that's what you're going to take away from today. A company called Every, I think, coined the term last year. And the concept is essentially this. Through working with AI, I want the AI to learn from its mistakes. I want it to adapt the patterns that I instill. I want to be able to essentially get a compounding effect. Every session we have together is going to make the next one better than the previous one. I don't want to go down into the same rabbit hole. If I've gone down there once, that's the last of it. We have to pull our hair out sometimes, but then we should never have to do that again. And I think it's to be expected over time that the AI does that. Right now, we have to do some sort of clever tricks to make it happen. But it's definitely possible to make it happen. 2 months ago, I had a conversation with Boris on the screen there, the creator of Claude Code. And what struck me after the conversation was that every time I asked him, Boris, when do you think it's going to be possible to do this or that? And I asked him a lot of challenging questions, and he sort of always just answered, yeah, that's possible today. You just have to ask Claude. And I realized that, he obviously sits at the frontier of this. And after that, I started trying that out myself. And I think our biggest problem right now is that we lack imagination. We have a set way of thinking what is possible and what is not possible. We are used to that those definitions, they do not change frequently. But now, we need to recalibrate that definition more frequently than ever. What was not possible back in December, a lot of that is possible now. And if it's not possible now, you should not discard it as impossible. You should make a note and try again in a month or two. And you'll be surprised. And the greatest trick of all, I think, is ask Claude, or your favorite AI. I'm going to talk a lot about Claude, but replace Claude with whatever your favorite AI is. And if you don't know how to get started, just ask Claude. How can we work better together? Give me 10 examples of questions I can ask you to become a better programmer when you write all the code for me. And you'll be surprised. The thing is, we need to offer up our taste, to use our judgment. And we'll get mediocre results on the first try. But the great thing is we can just say, yeah, those questions are stupid. I didn't like this and this and this. I actually like this one and this one. Give me 10 more. And then you'll get dramatically better responses. It's really all about mindset. And having that mindset is obviously linked to my first tip. So I'm going to go through 10 tips. And I'm going to, in the short amount of time that I have, blast through a lot of examples for you. So buckle up your seatbelts, and I will share the slides afterwards as well. First tip, I think, is important, not only for developers, for anyone using AI. This is the most important thing to get better results from AI. Context is king. The reason why AI hallucinates, gives us mediocre results, it's our fault. We haven't given enough context. AI is trained to fill in the blanks. If we don't provide enough context, we will still get an answer. But it'll be like the background on this NDC screen here. Purple gradients. Definitely generated by AI. So there are many ways for us to give context and provide context to AI beyond prompting. I'm not going to talk too much about prompting. But we should make use of the capabilities of the models that we have access to today. And one thing that I would like to say, if you're working in larger code bases, is to give direction, is to point in the right direction. Rather than have the agent explore everything and get confused, if you know where we're working, what you're working on, tell the agent where we're focused, where we're working. Use Markdown files. Markdown files, I know a lot of people hate Markdown files. But let's be honest, we don't need to read all of those Markdown files. Just accept that these are files for the agents, right? Someone told me, sitting here on the front row here, that now maybe we're sort of in this situation where we're writing Markdown for the agent to write the .NET code that we used to write ourselves, right? It's sort of moving in that direction. Yes, we should invest more time in the spec and the scoping. But direct, in most of these agent harnesses, you can use the @ symbol and point both to folders and files, and you can do that in your rule files as well. Secondly, a lot of people miss out on this. You can use images. I think most people are aware, but think about that next time when you're trying to explain something to AI. Sometimes it's easier to show something to the AI. Take a screenshot. Draw on that screenshot. Circle around that button, or even draw an arrow. The image capabilities of these models are excellent, so you don't need to spell out everything. We should use the tools we have available. The context window is important. It's become larger and larger. Today we have 1 million tokens in the token window limit in Claude Code. Most models up until recently had around 200,000. That was sort of the size of the window, the size of the glass, let's say. And the thing is, we need to be aware that we start out with an empty glass, but the glass already gets certain things filled up before we even have the first prompt, right? So the system prompt, the skills definition, the tool definitions, our Claude MD or Agents MD, it all goes into that glass even before we've started our conversation. And we need to be aware that over time the glass fills up. What happens is that when it's full, it's going to pour over. Problem is, we don't control exactly what goes out of the glass and what remains in the glass. So this is important, because you will see that as context fills up, quality goes down. So bigger is not always better. It feels convenient that we don't have to worry too much about it now since we have 1 million, but we should still keep an eye on context, and the models get confused as we have too much context. So context is king, but it's not just about quantity, it's also about essentially making sure we have the highest impact tokens that gives us the best possible output. My recommendation to everyone is to keep an eye on context. In Claude Code, you can do /status line, and you can essentially just describe to Claude what kind of status line you want. So you do /status line and say, show me the repo, show me the branch that I'm on, show me the context window as a visual indicator, like a battery bar. Use natural language. And it will create a really nice status line for you, where you will always be able to see how full your glass is. Then, as you're getting to a point where you see that this is starting to fill up, or whenever you're done with one task, I would always clear context, start with a new glass. Don't keep working and sort of confuse the model over time. You can always do also /context, which actually shows you the glass in a visual representation to see what's actually in my glass. for those who are interested in that. But /clear is a very powerful one, I would recommend you combine that with obviously setting up your rule file. So ClaudeMD or AgentsMD, if you're using other harnesses, is probably the single most important file that we have. This is where we need to describe the project in a way that the agent saves time when it's working with us. We describe the common gotchas. We describe our tools that we use. This is very important. So if you use CLI tools as a developer, tell the agent. The agent can use the same tools. Describe it and say, this is how we do this. This is how we do this. And the great thing is, and what people miss out on, I think, is that you maybe go online and say, show me the greatest ClaudeMD file or AgentsMD file, and we download that. Don't do that. The best file is a file that is created for your preferences, for your project, for your workflow. And don't write that file yourself. Come on, have the AI do it. The AI is excellent at doing that. You can just say /init in Claude Code, and it'll create a starting point for you. That's not going to be perfect. You're going to give your feedback, and you're going to give your preferences, and over time, remember, you can always say, hey, Claude, let's learn from our mistakes. Update our rule file. When you see Claude do something wrong or go down, or your agent do something wrong, go down the rabbit hole, always remember to tell it to learn from its mistakes. Actively manage the file. It's not a one-off thing. Now with the newer tools like Claude Code, we have something called auto memory. So now we have ClaudeMD, and then we also have an memory MD file. The intention is great, and a lot of people are trying to solve this problem right now. How do we have long-lasting memory, not just short-term memory, for our agents? And it's not there yet. So that means we should not fully trust the auto memory. But we can actively manage the memory. We can say, please remember this, or add this to memory, and it will update the memory. You'll notice sometimes it does this itself, updating memory. And you can always go in and edit it, or ask it to remove or forget something, right? So keep an eye on it and actively manage it. One of my favorite ways of working with Claude and other agents is essentially to ask them to interview me, to ask me questions. You can also say, what can you tell me about our ways of working? And then you'll get some answers based on the memory, based on the ClaudeMD file. And then you can say, what more information do you need from me for us to have a better working relationship? When you're sort of thinking up a feature or something like that, or working on a bug, you can also use this tool. The actual tool is called Ask User Question, but you can just say something like, ask me questions, or interview me until you have all the information we need. Don't do anything before you've asked me 5 questions. What context are you missing to solve this in an award-winning way? And you'll get better results. So make use of that ability so that you don't have to think of everything yourself. You can even cheat a little bit on this last one, actually. You can actually say, give me choices, numbered choices for each question, if you're lazy and you don't want to spell everything out. And it'll give you actually really good options, like a multiple choice exam. It'll do that for you. So actively manage your memory, use /clear. I always use a progress file. So that means that when I've been working on something, I have a / command, which is called continue later. And in that file, I describe to Claude that now we're going to call it a night. You need to recap what we've done today. I want you to reflect on what we've done together, add any key learnings to memory, and then write the progress to progress MD. That's sort of all in one / command, roughly along those lines. And then I do /clear, and then I have another / command, which is called continue work. And that / command essentially just says, read progress MD. Let's continue where we left off. Now we have preserved context, we have a new glass, an empty glass, and we can continue with a much more focused effort. I could have probably spoken an entire hour about skills, skills is the single most important thing for everyone to learn in 2026, in my opinion. When anyone asks me what should we do in 2026, my answer is skills. I honestly, and this is my personal opinion obviously, but I don't think we need to build agents anymore. Last year we had to write code to create agents, but now we have excellent agent harnesses that we can use, and what we really need is to equip them with the right tools and the right skills. So build skills, invest in skills. Not just for development, not just for us. Go back to your organizations and instill the mindset that we should codify work processes in skills. How many of you have built a skill or created a skill? How many of you have heard about skills? So people say you should probably ask the question that least people will raise their hands on, but I like people to raise their hands because it sort of keeps the blood flowing as well, right? To confuse things, obviously now Claude and Anthropic introduced this concept called plugins. Plugins is just a way to distribute things such as skills, but also connectors and hooks and subagents, etc., etc., etc. So when someone says plugins, you know, it typically means a skill combined with something else. There's a plugin marketplace, but you can use this also in other coding harnesses, so you don't need to use Claude Code. You can actually use whatever Claude has published, and you can apply it in your project. Again, I like to say, don't go online and download skills. Make your own skills. They're going to be far better than whatever you find online, and a lot safer. There's a lot of malicious stuff out there. But I do trust what Anthropic publishes in their marketplace. And I would recommend 3 things to everyone if you haven't done this. The most important one is the skill creator skill, which just makes your agent excellent at creating, testing, and improving skills. So that's your starting point. You should all install the skill creator skill. It's a bit meta, but yeah, then now Claude is excellent at creating skills. The other 2 that I would recommend are the ones in green here. First, if you want to move away from AI slop design, install the front-end design skill, and you've just opened up a new world. Now all of a sudden, Claude can create amazing things, or any coding agent, really. So front-end design is a super powerful skill. The other one, how many of you have heard about or used the superpowers skill? Okay, now I'm excited because that means there are so many people that are going to wake up and try this out, and you're going to be amazed. This is the single most important skill that I have in my everyday, and that is superpowers. I would very much recommend that you check it out. There are many opinionated ways of working with AI, but superpowers have captured something that I believe is sort of the currently best approach from brainstorming through writing specs, to turning that spec into an implementation plan, to actually having a fairly sound implementation of the TDD approach with a really, really nice way where it's checking itself at every step. So it's using a bunch of subagents to check whatever it's done. And the great thing about this is that you're going to spend more time up front if you use it. You're going to spend more time on the brainstorming, on the scoping. But then once you invest that time, you're going to one-shot whatever you ask for. It's just dramatically going to increase the output. But it comes with, obviously, a much higher token use. So yeah, I would very much recommend you check out superpowers. So just briefly on skills. Skills is, in essence, another markdown file. It's a file with instructions to our agent. It's not meant for us to read the file, right? It's written. We need to keep that in mind. The agent should read the file. The basic skill is just a folder with a skill.md file inside it. And the really powerful skills can optionally include resources, so files, templates, for instance, reference documentation. There are so many things we can actually bundle inside of our skill. And then lastly, what makes it really, really powerful is, of course, that we can bundle in code, which means that now we have LLMs that are obviously, by definition, non-deterministic in how they operate. But with skills, we can ensure deterministic behavior for whatever we need that for, through code, scripts, snippets inside the skill. So that means that we can ensure that something happens the same way every time. For instance, loading data, pulling data from an API, etc. And you can all add that into a skill. Lesser known things, you can also say that a skill can be user invocable false, which means that a user will not see that skill in their slash commands. And then the other way around, you can also say disable model invocation, which means that it's only humans that can actually activate. So it's flipped around. I know, it's like some engineers that did this, obviously. Yeah, probably. Use online skills as inspiration, but build your own skills. My approach is you can use the skill creator skill, and you can essentially say /skill creator and start from scratch, and then it will sort of guide you through almost like a wizard. What skill are you looking to build, etc. You can do that. My recommended approach is to do something real. Solve a problem, have a working session, and then when you're happy, don't go celebrate. Say, hey, Claude, let's turn this into a skill. It's the absolute best way of creating a skill. And you should all be thinking, anything you do more than once probably deserves to become a skill. I like to think of skills as two sort of main categories. One, how do I give my opinions, my workflows, my preferences to the coding agents? That's one use case for skills. The other is, how do I give my coding agent abilities that it doesn't have? For instance, Claude cannot create images. Or can it? All we need is one skill. A nano banana skill. And all of a sudden, Claude can use the nano banana API from Google, and now it can create images. Can it create music? Nope. But with the 11 Labs skill, it can create music. So just think, what capabilities do I lack? And you can probably build a skill for it. Or better yet, ask Claude to build a skill for it. Yeah, so there are some examples here. I think one thing to call out is a little known fact is that in a skill or in a slash command, they're sort of the same thing. But in a skill or a slash command, you can actually put in bash commands. And if you use the exclamation mark, what happens is that command will actually run prior to the execution of the slash command or the skill, which is a way for us to essentially inject context at runtime. You can do some amazing things with that. Oh, and of course, you can combine skills and chain skills. And you can have one skill call on another skill and say, once we've done this, use this skill to achieve this and this and this. So just invest time in skills. One final note on skills. Skills are supposed to trigger automatically based on the description in the YAML front matter. So in the skill file, it's a markdown file, where we have a front matter, and it must contain a name and a description. The description is very important. This is what we need to optimize when we see that the skill isn't triggering. We need to look at our description and see, is something missing from the description? Because of context preservation and sort of efficiency in the context window, we use something called progressive disclosure, which means that at start, in the glass, when it's empty, we're not loading all of the skills information. We're just loading the name and the description for every skill. Based on that, the agent will say, when I ask it to do something, you're asking me to create an image. Do I have any tools or any skills that would be relevant for solving this problem? Yes, I see that I have this nano banana skill. I should probably use that. And then you'll see your agent's output say red nano banana skill. And now all of a sudden it knows. So it means that we need to have very good descriptions. But even with good descriptions, we do see that they do not always trigger. So Vercel did a benchmark on this, and they came up with a clever yet very easy solution. The most important skills that you want your agent to be using in the sort of day-to-day, you duplicate the description or essentially say when and how to use the skills in your Claude MD or Agents MD file. And that actually brought the skill invocation up to 100%. So if you're sort of struggling with skills not always happening, etc., just make sure you also include it in your in your Agents MD file. All right. Always make a plan. I think this is where we need to invest more time. And again, I guess developers aren't always that fond of writing spec documents. But the great thing is AI is really good at that. So what we need to do is obviously describe what we want, explain our approaches, our preferences, our taste. But then we can let the AI help us flesh it out. I don't think that I'm a very creative person, but with the help of AI, I've become really, really creative. It helps me think outside the box. And one advice is that we sort of do have a tendency to steer the AI the way we prompt it. We typically say, I'm thinking we should do this and this and this, what do you think? And the AI is obviously very prone to sycophancy. So that means it will say, yeah, you're absolutely right. That sounds like a great idea. Let's do that. So think about that next time. And maybe save your opinion for step 2. I'm not saying we shouldn't share our opinion. But if we share it up front, the answers will be biased and guided along whatever we said up front. Sometimes it can be quite useful to not be too specific. I've experienced it many times that I thought this was the only way to solve something, and then Claude comes up with a different approach or a framework I've never heard about, and I was like, yeah, that's interesting, let's do that. So yeah, I'm just encouraging you to invite AI to the process as well. There's been a lot of talk about sort of what's the best approach, and some people talk about spec, some people talk about vertical slices, combining these things, and there's many different approaches. There's a lot of frameworks out there as well. You'll find a bunch of GitHub projects. Feel free to experiment with them. I've landed on superpowers, essentially, which covers all of this. It gives us a great way to do all of the planning steps, with me being the human in the loop, always checking with me. I have to approve every step. I do spend more time on that, but it also feels closer to what I had in my mind. One thing, if you haven't tried superpowers, even if you don't want to use all of superpowers, I encourage you to try the brainstorm skill, which is sort of the first step in superpowers. And the great thing about it is, which is relatively new, came out a few weeks ago, is that it will, depending on what you're asking for, it'll say, yeah, in order to talk about this, it would be useful to show you something. Are you OK with me spinning up a web server? And then I'm like, yeah. And then it actually shows me in the browser, do you want us to go in this direction or in this direction? Here are a few options. And then you can give feedback. And it's done, like it does this on architecture, it does this on design, on, and you can use it for non-coding stuff as well. But I really encourage you to test that out. Of course, it burns a bit of tokens, but it's worth it. So yeah, you have plan mode in Claude Code, in Cursor, in Copilot. So you have plan mode. I used to use plan mode for everything. Now I tend to use the /brainstorm skill in superpowers, which is sort of plan mode on steroids. OK. Either way, make a plan. Give your feedback, your input, but maybe not upfront always. You can sort of do your idea, but maybe not how to solve it. Yeah, and check out superpowers. So this is maybe the most important tip according to Boris, the creator of Claude Code. And that is essentially to give your agent a way to verify its own work. If not, we have to be the bottleneck, and we will be the bottleneck. You probably experienced this where it will say that it's done, and then you spin up the dev server, and it's not working. And they're like, why do I have to tell you that this isn't working? Can't you just do this? Right? And it can do that. But we need to give it the ability to do so, right? So one very easy way of doing that is, for instance, to use the Chrome plugin and essentially say, once you're done, use use Chrome to test it, right? Or some headless browser MCP or something like that. Whatever your preference is. If you're building native apps, you can, well, at your own risk, but you can use computer use with Claude now. It was actually launched on Windows yesterday, I think. That means that you can actually spin up an actual emulator and actually run things on your computer, not just limited to the browser. So give Claude a way to verify its output. The Chrome plugin has become really, really good. Another tool that I use for giving feedback is something called agentation. And agentation is essentially a skill that we tell Claude to use, and it will essentially inject a layer in our web app. And by spinning up the dev server, I have access to essentially interacting with the DOM of my application, adding annotations, and when I'm done with those annotations, it copies back to an agent prompt, which has complete DOM paths for everything. So instead of me explaining that button down on the page there, over there, it doesn't work, I can click on it and say, this doesn't work. Change this, remove that. It's just, I always look at ways to improve the bottleneck, and now the bottleneck is me. How can I manage more agents without losing my sleep? So feedback is obviously one bottleneck, and I think this one is a great way of giving feedback. I used to say use the right model, but I've changed it now. Just use the best model. Don't worry too much about the costs. It's easy for me to say, but tell your employer. This one is funny also when you're one of the richest persons in the world, but NVIDIA said that if I'm paying someone $500,000, I expect them to at least spend $250,000 on tokens. That's a lot of tokens. I mean, I get a long way with a $200 plan from Claude Code Max, right? But the point is, I think, and it's also easy to say when you are probably not paying anything for using the model since you're in the company that creates the model. But I do actually agree with Boris when he says that the price that we pay and the time increase maybe of using a smarter model, they are slower, obviously, but the output is dramatically better, and I think, in my experience, it sort of outweighs the time that I have to spend fixing the lesser results that I get from a cheaper model. But I mean, clearly Sonnet is a great model as well. But if you can, I would use max effort, and I would use Opus 4.7, even for smaller things, to be honest with you. There is one approach which you can, it's now part of Claude, but you can also implement it yourself. It's not that difficult to do. It's essentially saying that we use our advisor strategy, as they call it, where we essentially have the greatest model, Opus, being the advisor, but then it sort of lets lesser models perform tasks, but they can check in with the smarter models. And the smarter model will check the work of the lesser model. So that's one approach that I think more people will start adopting when it comes to sort of token optimization. Time flies, but we still have time. So tip number 6. Skills is most important in my opinion, but we also have other tools in our toolbox. Subagents being one. Now you can actually use subagents in skills, and you can sort of ask a skill to use subagents. Claude will use subagents by itself. We now have subagents in all the other coding harnesses as well. But one thing that is very important to know about subagents is that they have their own context window. So that means that our main agent can spin up multiple subagents and essentially giving us endless context windows. It also allows us to run things in parallel. So we can, for instance, say, go through all of these files and do the following in each of those files, use subagents to do so. then Claude will spin up 10 subagents, and they will work in parallel with batches. So all you need to do is essentially ask Claude or your agent to do so. Use subagents. You can also define subagents in Markdown files and essentially instruct Claude to use those agents for certain things. So you can have your own architect agent, you can have your code reviewer agent, etc. And you can chain them as well. So you can say first use the code analyzer agent and then use the optimizer agent to fix. And then you can put that in the skill file if you want to. How many of you use hooks? Yeah, hooks is sort of a bit more of a technical thing, and at first it sort of came out as a mechanism for us to sort of put in place guardrails, which it definitely is. It's definitely the way that we can have guardrails outside of inference. That's the point of hooks, that we can make it trigger before and after certain events. Some of the key events are listed here, which means that we can say when the agent is done, the stop event, we want to do the following. Or before it uses a tool, we want to do the following. Or after a tool call has been made, we want to do the following. And now, just recently, supported in Claude, not supported in other harnesses yet, but everyone's obviously following along here. We also now support if statements in the hook. And everything we talked about earlier, like a hook can even make use of subagents. So there's getting to the point where we have really, really complex sort of tools in our toolbox. So hooks is something that, yes, we can use it for sort of preventing things from happening, but we can also use it for essentially ensuring that Claude follows our patterns. We can also use it to check. So after a file has been written, we want to automatically run a hook to, for instance, run a linter on the file, right? So that we ensure that it happens. Even though we told Claude to do so in our agents.md file, maybe it doesn't do that all the time. With hooks, we ensure that it happens all the time, every time. Yeah, there was a question.
I'm just wondering, because I've got a lot of hooks.
Yeah.
Are they expensive?
The hooks?
Yeah, because I can't tell.
Yeah, great question. Hooks don't cost anything really because they happen outside of inference. So that means that they're like essentially code happening and running before or after the LLM, right? So they're not going to cost you anything. What they do cost is, of course, time. Yeah. So they might sort of interrupt the flow and make the flow slower, right? So that's sort of the drawback of it, but I think that's why we want, like, sometimes that's essentially what we want, right? We want it to stop. A few months ago, it was a very big thing online called the Ralph Wiggum loop. Anyone heard about Ralph Wiggum? Well, from Simpsons, yeah. So the point was, you know, for those of you who have been working with AI coding, you've seen that, you know, it'll do something, and then it will say, okay, I'm done. Now the next steps would be following, should we continue or do you want to check? And it's sort of a way for it to sort of split up. So sometimes we just want to, well, just keep going until you're done. You're not done. You just did like phase 1. You have 10 phases that you're going to do. Don't bother me, right? And that's when someone came up with Ralph Wiggum. The thing is, it's a bit of an over-engineering approach, I believe, and I personally. You can solve the whole thing with one stop clause, one stop hook. Essentially, like Boris says here, poke Claude to keep going whenever it stops. So essentially what you can do, you can add a stop hook, or you can ask Claude to help you create a stop hook, and just say, when done, just say continue. So instead of me typing continue, the hook just types continue. So this is a way to achieve a very easy Ralph Wiggum loop. And of course, what you need to do is to put in the stop criteria. Because continue with what? If I'm done, I'm done, right? But you can essentially achieve that very simply with hooks. I said this in the beginning, and I've dedicated its own tip. Learn from rabbit holes. I very much urge you to use this concept. Think about this actively when you work with your code. and with your coding agent that you want it to learn from mistakes. Compound engineering. And it's fairly straightforward. You can just say something along these lines. Now that we fixed this issue, I never, ever want to experience this again. Learn from your mistakes. My continue later / command started out as multiple / commands. One of them was /reflect. So I essentially had a reflect command, which instructed Claude to think about what we've just done. Were there ways we could have done this differently? If you had started over, would you have approached it in a different way? Are there any mistakes we can learn from? Essentially asking it to reflect. It's really, really powerful. And then, of course, you just want to capture that, right? You don't want it to just be an output in the terminal and you read it and you're like, yeah, good job, Claude, and then it's gone, because next time you do /clear, that is gone. So you want to, of course, make sure that you capture those mistakes either in a separate markdown file or in your ClaudeMD file, whatever works. And remember, in your ClaudeMD file, you can point to multiple other files. So you can, for instance, have a debugging learnings file. You don't need to read that file every time. You don't need to fill the glass with that file every time. But in your ClaudeMD file, you can say, when we're working on front end, make sure you also check our front end guidelines or our learnings from front end work, which is in this markdown file. So you can branch out. That way, you can preserve the context window, OK? You can also ask it to essentially, as I said with skills as well, I prefer to do something and then say, let's recap, let's learn from this. But you could, of course, also do something up front by you saying, here's how I like to do something, here's my preferences, and you can ask Claude to interview you. I am really a big fan of creating patterns and pattern files. And before skills, I just had a bunch of markdown files, and I pointed at them when we were doing like DB migrations. I pointed at my migrations MD file, and it sort of gave the guidelines on how we do migrations. But now I just package all of that into a skill. So I have skills for a bunch of different patterns in the code bases that I work. In order to come up with patterns, yes, you can do, as I showed in the previous video, you can ask it what patterns do we have in our code base, or based on how we work together, what are the patterns. But this one is really interesting. In Claude Code, you can do /insights. I would suspect all the other coding harnesses to implement something similar. Because sort of a little-known thing is that all sessions we do are stored in files, in the home folder, in the .claude folder. For all the projects we run, they're all gathered together in the .claude home folder. And with /insights, Claude essentially analyzes all the sessions, and then it tries to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly. And at the bottom of that report, which will come out of running an /insights command, you will actually get suggestions to how you can improve your workflow. It'll say, actually, these errors happens a lot, but why don't you just create this hook and it'll actually save a lot of time for you? Or why don't you create a skill for this? Or why don't you use MCP servers for this? Because you keep doing this and this and this. Or Claude keeps doing this and this and this. And when I realized this, I was like, whoa, this is crazy. So try that out. You'll learn a lot about yourself. It can be a bit embarrassing, but it gives a lot of really concrete tips. And the great thing is there's a copy button, so you can sort of just go in and say, yeah, let's set up that hook. Anyone tried that before? It's so good when no one raises their hand. It means you learned something today. I love that. All right, so think compound engineering. Start with your ClaudeMD, agentsmd rule file. Think about the patterns. Ask Claude to give you advice on how to improve or how to work better together. Make sure that you learn from mistakes together with the AI. And definitely, when you need something to happen every single time, use hooks. Yeah, I'll share the slides on Slack afterwards as well. But yeah, that's sort of my recipe for compound engineering. OK, final 10. So this one is quick and easy. When relevant, I would use MCP servers. But remember that as a developer, it's better to use CLI tools if we have CLI tools, to be honest with you. But that doesn't mean MCP servers are not useful. I gave a workshop yesterday about MCP servers. But CLI tools are really, really powerful, and Claude excels, or your coding agent excels at using CLI tools. But make sure that you put it in your agent.md or Claude.md file. These are the tools that I use. I would, for instance, say if you use GitHub, I would use the GitHub CLI over the GitHub MCP. Be very specific and just say use GH to do the following. There are a bunch of great MCPs out there. I now tend to use the Chrome plugin a lot, but I also use the Chrome DevTools MCP, which is really great. It allows us to essentially interact with Chrome DevTools, accessing the log and everything, which is great. Context 7, if you want to have updated docs for your agent for almost any package out there. There are obviously different MCPs for databases. Don't do write MCPs, just do read-only MCPs, is my advice. There are obviously some security challenges with this. Yeah, and the Figma MCP is also really great. I don't use that myself, but I know a lot of people use it, and it works really well if you have your designs in Figma. The last one, I have to sort of give my fair warning here. Once you've sort of mastered the first steps of working with AI, there's a finite number of coffee cups you can drink in a day while you're waiting for your agent. So sort of step 1 is obviously open a new window and ask something else in the other window, right? That's the first step. But then over time, you sort of end up in a situation where how many agents can I keep going at the same time? And we sort of have a cognitive load limit, I think. That's where I've found mine to be 6 windows with Claude running here, plus a few on my phone. But that's sort of where I've maxed out now, and then I get very tired at the end of the day. But yeah, it can be addictive once you get started, because it just feels really powerful when you see that you can do so much. But I also think this is a bit of a dangerous thing for us as developers, because at first it feels really powerful, right? But then our managers start expecting this is the new norm, right? So, you know, maybe in the beginning, sort of slow down a little bit. Don't go all in. But on a serious note, I think this is actually going to be a little bit of a challenge. I think right now, of course, it's a bit like overwhelming. But what will the new sort of workday be for all of us? Who knows? But it will be different. But it is powerful, and I don't think we should sort of slow down so much that we're like losing out here, right? So I am a fan of keeping things simple. So you can do a lot of advanced setups as well. Often, to me, it's like work trees is a bit of a sort of a fiddly thing, but now it's become very easy to use work trees. For instance, with Claude Code, you just do a -w, give it a name, and it sort of will take care of it for you. But that's relatively new. But up until that came out, I actually just checked out the same repo physically in several folders, and I just span up multiple Claudes in multiple folders. That works as well. You don't need to overcomplicate things. But work trees is obviously now fairly easy to set up and use. And then we also, it's good to know that you can actually fork sessions as well. So that means that when you are inside a session, you can essentially create a fork in the session and have 2 conversations from that point in the context window. So essentially take the context window, clone the context window, continue here with the same starting point. Can be useful. I don't use that a lot myself, to be honest, but I do use work trees now all the time. Yeah, you can also say use work trees for your agents to Claude, and it'll sort of go out and solve this problem in its own work tree, for instance. Just ask Claude. That's sort of my advice to you. I use GitHub, and I actually quite love using GitHub issues. And I have this flow where I've obviously trained Claude in how to use GitHub issues. I've given it my style in how to write descriptions. And when I'm in the middle of something, Claude might sometimes say, you know, we could do this, we could do that. And I'm like, yeah, that's a great idea, but stay focused, Claude. Let's not go off rails. Then I'll do a /btw, by the way, and I'll just say, can you create GitHub issues for these ideas? And he'll go off and it'll create GitHub issues. And then when I go brush my teeth, I have a game where I go on the Claude mobile app, on the GitHub app, actually. I go in on the GitHub app, and I try to tag a few of the issues that Claude created, and I just say, hey, Claude, can you fix this? @Claude, can you fix this? And then I see if it's, how many did it manage to finish before I finished my brushing my teeth. And I did 4, that's my record, 4 pull requests. It's really powerful for smaller things, but you need to obviously break things down and make it sort of containable. This one came out just recently called remote control. So you can essentially type /remote control, and now I can actually have a remote control on my phone. So I can actually interact live with a running session on my computer. So this is still going to run on my computer. But the funny thing was when they made this video, it's the first time that developers can actually go out and touch grass. So now you can go for a walk your dog or whatever, and you can actually continue working. My wife hates this feature because I'm like sitting here and I'm talking to Claude like that. But yeah, it's fun, and it really works. Some more advanced ones, the final ones before we wrap up here. We have something called /loop, which you can run on your computer, and it can have a defined time, or it can be a sort of something that runs on a schedule that Claude decides is the right schedule. So you can do something like loop, babysit all my pull requests, and it will just run the process and keep doing it. But behind the scenes, it just uses 3 new tools that Claude has access to. I'm suspecting all coding harnesses to get this as well, but essentially it's going to create these cron jobs. We also have something called schedule or routines now, which means that you can actually take a similar approach, but you send it off to the cloud environment, and they will run on for instance, Anthropic's environment. It will check out the repo, and it will do whatever you ask it to do. Okay. Time is flying. So lastly, for the really, really big things, we have something called agent teams. I think it's something that I would use with care, and to be honest, most use cases don't really require an agent team. It's very expensive. It uses something like 40 to 50% more tokens. So it's definitely for the bigger things. We also have something called /batch, which will essentially spin up a bunch of agents to take care of larger tasks. So try it out, but it comes definitely with a price. And finally, the most important thing I think that I've realized after when Boris told me this as well is like, just ask Claude. There are capabilities that you don't think exist are maybe there already. Just ask Claude or your agent to build the tools you need. And something that is very important is that you can also remind Claude, remember Claude, you can use Claude to solve things. So Claude can actually spin up a headless mode Claude to do something, or use the Claude API as part of solving something. And it's like, just opens up some insane opportunities. Last tip, be the human in the loop. Yes, AI models are getting better and better, but they do make mistakes. So we need to still check the PRs. Don't let everything just fly by. But be smart about it, right? You can have the AI check the AI before you invest your time. My favorite prompt is make it better. And it works. It just forces the AI to do another round to see if there's anything it can improve. Or are you sure? Just try that out, and you'll weed out the most common mistakes. But be the human in the loop. And that was my time. So yeah, thank you very much. Follow me on LinkedIn, and thank you.